at what stage or threshold do you think an artist has to pass where then they're ready for an artist manager, a booking agent?
I think, from my DIY kind of perspective, I want to say like never. I want to say like, be like Russ and be like some of these artists who like just built the business themselves and then hired people on the side and not cut them in on a percentage and find ways to kind of build it as like as your own business and DIY the whole way. But that's not, realistic for everybody. And so my kind of realistic answer to that question would be it's time to outsource when you're at a point where you doing all of the roles is like holding you back.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Miltrick Media. I'm here sitting down with Benjamin Stein, the creator and founder of Booking.io, Playlist Supply, as well as Radio Promo.io. I got all those names correct, right?
BookingAgentio, Playlist Supply, and Radio Promo.io.
Radio Promo.io. My apologies, but
no worries.
Really excited to sit down with you, Benji. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And yeah, how's everything going? We were talking about before, but yeah, how's your Friday going so far?
So far, so good. We were just talking about the weather and the drastic differences between the West Coast and the East Coast right now. You're dealing with snow, and I've got a little bit of sunshine. And I was actually halfway there. I was out in Colorado not too long ago.
Nice.
For a little friend's bachelor trip, and I gotta get a few days of snow in myself, but everything's good. Happy that it's Friday, almost the weekend. Had a really strong work week, and yeah, I'm grateful.
Hell yeah, that's the best, especially when it's like a nice productive week. But yeah, like you were saying, we got swamped with some good snow. It took a while to dig out the cars. Now it's like a little warmer, like 40, 45 degrees, so I'm loving it. It feels like summer here now with that, you know what I mean? But like I was telling you, I definitely got to try and get out to the West Coast soon. Colorado, too, that'd be sick to visit. I want to see some Rockies, you know what I mean?
Yep.
I got to make it out. I'm slacking, but, we do what we got to do.
Exactly.
But, yeah, it was great to meet you and connect with you, and also been talking back and forth with Ryan, who also works for the company. It was a pleasure to connect with him, and he gave me a great deep dive of these platforms, and I'm just really excited to dive more into it with you, and we're going to get all into it. I think, yeah, it's going to be a great conversation. So, to start off, of course, what inspired you to launch and start these services?
Great question. So yeah, I'll kind of go all the way back to the beginning for that one.
Please, yes.
Before any music tech, before any software development, before Playlist Supply or BookingAgentio or Radio Promo.io, I kind of cut my teeth in the industry doing management. I got into management just by helping a few friends in college do marketing for their music. I kind of realized that I had like a good ear for the music. I had a good marketing sensibility, understanding of social media, digital media, ads, all that kind of stuff. And so it kind of naturally was something that my friend, who was just like, he was good at making music, but none of the other stuff. And so I kind of helped him out, and I did like a couple little internships, and then for my first job, I applied to work at a few management companies, and I kind of had like a pretty normative trajectory of someone who kind of wanted to get their feet wet within the music industry and try some different things. And, just through networking and just through, the way management kind of goes, I had a nice roster of artists that fell into my lap, and people that I was working with, people that I was passionate about. And, this is now kind of like year or two before COVID, and kind of right around the time when Spotify playlists were really getting hot. It was kind of like the marketing move, like, 4 years ago or so.
Yeah.
Indie managers, labels, and people started to realize that a lot of these third-party, independently curated playlists actually had a lot of traction. And I had a couple experiences with artists that I was representing where we went into labels, they had a nice deal. They had a nice budget for marketing for a project or a single or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt that the label wasn't doing such a great job. I felt like some of the budget was getting squandered. I felt like the money was going into places that, didn't have any analytics or any attribution to follow up on that. And so there was a few instances where I was like, instead of you guys doing all this in-house marketing and just telling me that's the best we can do, you could pass my management company the budget, and we're going to figure out some more, grassroots, boots on the ground, some more organic, like DIY kind of strategies to, help my artists get the best result from their budget and from their money and from their time as well. And so this specifically revolved around playlisting. There was a couple times where these labels kind of outsourced playlisting to third-party agencies and middlemen. And whenever I would follow up for attribution, I wasn't happy with, where the streams were coming from, what I thought were maybe fishy results. And so I told them, listen, my team is going to do the playlisting for this release in-house. And what we did was, me and, a few little management assistants and stuff, we kind of dug through Spotify manually, and we would go through and we would find playlists that were a good fit for the artist. And we would try all necessary means to get in contact with them, whether that's looking at their Spotify profile and their name, and then looking online to see if we could find a contact or if we could find their social media. And we built exactly.
Gotcha.
And this is, I think at this point there was basically no services like ours for getting in contact with Spotify playlists. At this point, it's like mostly people interested in blogs, and people were still not that hip to it. And so we built this like massive spreadsheet of playlists that fit our artists, and we manually filled out all the curator contact information, and we had really strong results. I used the artist accounts in some instances to DM these playlist owners. We, offer them merchandise, or we try and build a relationship. And some of these curators ended up being, supporters of that artist for a long time after, ended up playlisting multiple releases. And so this strategy, I was like, wait a second, this doesn't actually cost that much. The labels were just telling me it cost a lot. This is just some like time and some DMs and some outreach and some work. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. And I can do work. My team and I can do work, especially if it's going to save some money for the artist. And so that's like the manager's job. And I got such great results. I was talking to a friend of mine who's now my co-founder, and he was in booking. He was also doing artist management. And so he was like, actually, there might be a way for kind of us to automate this process that you and your team were doing. He kind of tested the method out on his own. We built like a rough script that was just something that ran off our computers. And then, after giving that kind of rough script out to like handful of different managers and music industry people, the feedback I got from everyone was, this is next level. Like, you got to make this into a website. You got to make this available to everybody. And so that's what we did. We built it into the first edition of Playlist Supply. We made it a website that's online. We made it a subscription service that any artist, any manager, any label can sign up for.
Yeah.
Most of our early clients were bigger labels and major labels and bigger artists and managers that I knew from my personal network. And so that allowed us to kind of refine the product, really develop the software into something, something special. And I realized, my philosophy with management was to try and empower and surface as many artists as possible. And I realized, through building software and music tech solutions, we can have a much wider impact on, indie artists than me working with one person or two people or five people. And so, my partner and I kind of went all in on that philosophy. And that led to, Playlist Supply kind of snowballing, and us being able to ideate and build some other products like BookingAgentio, which is already kind of, we had a really cool Billboard write-up by Billboard's head of touring. And it was basically like, why has no one done this before? All of the data is out there, for radio, for booking, for playlists. The data is all publicly available. All the information is out there. It's often just gate kept. You've got like booking agents whose whole career depends on their contact book on their iPhone.
Yeah.
And, if other people could get those contacts, they could send the same email or do the same call. But, it's like this old school music industry kind of vibe where there's these people that are kind of gatekeepers to whether it's marketing or whether it's to, placements or show bookings. And so we were kind of like, it's 21st century. We've got AI, we've got the internet. It's time to kind of bring tools and tech and data to everyday artists and indie managers. And this is the kind of stuff that labels have been working with for a long time. And, if an artist can download Ableton now and go straight into producing their own music, they don't need to pay an engineer or a studio. People make music at home. Artists can do management from home too. And it's like, that's kind of the story of how we got to where we are now. And, what pushed me from kind of being on the music side of things into the tech side of things. Yeah.
No, that's phenomenal. That's a great story talking about the beginnings of everything. When you were first starting out during that time period you mentioned, when you were building everything, what would you say was the biggest challenge you faced early on?
That's a great question. I think the biggest challenge was, you know, people who don't see the vision, people who don't necessarily understand the implications, trying to, say like, whenever you're doing something new, whenever you're doing something groundbreaking, and this is for artists who make music too.
Mm-hmm.
If you're making a new genre, if you're like, if you're like Sababy, or you're like, I don't know, there's so many cool artists who kind of, they're the first. I know, like, I'm trying to think of a good example right now. Someone like, I don't know, Larry June, or there's so many artists that kind of make a new sound. And at first, everyone's like, oh, this is played out, or oh, this is whack, or oh, this is too experimental. And they might doubt it at first. But if you believe what you're working on is something that's revolutionary, and you even have one or two people who are like, wow, this software changed my rollout. Like, this is next level. Or wow, that song, that new genre, this is so sick. Like, I love this. I want more of this. You gotta kind of work past the people that might have been stuck in that old paradigm or that old style industry, or the people that have maybe been doing the same thing for so long. They're not going to be open to too many new ideas and to too much change. And there was a lot of people with all three of these softwares who are like, yeah, like, how is this going to work? Like, who's going to use this? Like, how is this better than a booking agent? How is this better than a manager? How is this better than, paying a company, X amount of dollars? Mm-hmm. And in those instances, it's just kind of your job to prove them wrong. And so I would say the biggest challenge at the very beginning was probably people who doubted, people who maybe didn't really, think critically about the industry's problems, and who maybe just wanted to keep things the same, or there's a lot of people who are kind of anti-technology, anti-AI, anti-future progress kind of stuff. And, I think you got to have a healthy balance of that. Like, you got to reel yourself in sometimes, and also be able to address doubt and make sure you're not investing a ton of time into something that really isn't necessarily a good idea. But super early on, it was just like, are artists going to see the vision here? And yeah, we did a lot of beta testing, and I got a lot of feedback from people that I trust, kind of. Mm-hmm. And that's what I ran with more than, what the everyday industry person or manager was thinking.
That's great though, because like, relationships in the industry are currency, definitely. And that's great that you had that network to help with the innovation along the way. And this is another big topic in conversation in the music industry. With new technologies and innovations, some people are hesitant, some people are very adaptable and accepting. Why do you think some people are so hesitant to the new innovations and technologies?
Good question. Yeah, so it's I think it's a lot to do with comfort. People get comfortable in the way they do business, in the style of the business, in the state of the industry, regardless of what industry that might be. And, it's like when TikTok first came out, when Instagram first came out, you got to imagine, like, the artists that were like looking for the potential in that new technology and who embraced it early on are probably the ones now who kind of came out on top and were like early adopters. And, the whole music industry now is like obsessed with TikTok as a marketing platform for blowing up artists. But a few years ago, people were really doubting it. And if you were someone who a few years ago was like, you know what, instead of doubting this and like assuming it might go away, let's just make an account. Let's just run a few videos. Let's just build the brand a little bit on that platform. You're going to be like ahead of everyone else once it does come into the mainstream. And of course, there's a risk that doesn't work out and TikTok gets banned and it disappears, but I don't know. I think a lot of people are just comfortable in the way things are working and the way things are going. And it's, you gotta, if you want to really achieve progress, you gotta kind of run towards the fire and the change, and be willing to embrace discomfort and, what might be uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's a great point. Like you were saying, sometimes in order to push ahead past what you want to accomplish, you have to go against the grain.
Exactly.
Like we were talking about with TikTok and the new technologies, how we just mentioned when TikTok came out. I can't believe not thinking about it, like how even like those 5-6 years when it first came out, like who was embracing it, the whole dialogue around it. We were talking about these social media platforms when they first came out, the positive and negative that it was met with. Do you think now with AI, it's the same context? You think now with AI, if the early adopters may rise up on top, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, with AI, do you think now the early adapters, they'll be the ones to rise up on top in the next couple of years? Like similar how we were talking about when TikTok first came out or Instagram, all these new platforms. Do you feel maybe the same with AI?
I totally do. Of course, I think there's a lot of discussion and a lot of kind of interesting stuff being talked about when it comes to like generative AI, like making music and doing production. But just in my experience, in the short time that I've been using it, I think that indie artists who before would have needed to cut a manager in, 15% or cut in a booking agent 20%. Now, just with like a chat GPT subscription and a tool like BookingAgentio or Radio Promo IO or Playlist Supply, you've got your copywriting assistant, you've got your scheduling for your rollout assistant, and a lot of the stuff that might have been like organizational work that would hold artists back before can just be done by AI. And so if you're an artist and you really want to spend time focusing on the studio or focusing on, what you love about it, AI is something that can help with that organization, can help with drafting emails, can help with you planning out, okay, my new song's coming out next week. I want the rollout to be more than, just pushing marketing for 2 weeks after. I want like a 6-month rollout. You could have AI help you plan that and be like, okay, first month we're focusing on playlists. Second month we're focusing on radio. Fourth month we're focusing on getting that first show. And AI has access to all those informational resources and music history. And yeah, I think I think especially right now, you're going to see artists that are at least experimenting and learning how it works, pushing ahead in the next few years when that kind of stuff just becomes more and more pivotal. I could easily imagine AI like handling your social media for you in a few years. And that's like already one that I think about. Like even managing some big artists and managers who I know who are managing big artists, it's always like a little bit contentious if you have an artist who's not like natural at like social media, because they have to keep posting, they have to keep doing that work. And so I'm seeing a lot of that getting cleared up by some kind of AI assistance and AI tools. And yeah, I'm a fan of it. I also think that it's similar to when like Ableton came out and every artist could become a producer or a beat maker. A lot of people are upset that there's like AI generative music right now, but I think just like with DAWs becoming accessible, it's going to be the same thing. Like the saturation has always been there. Everyone could always kind of participate as of the last like 10, 20 years since the internet, basically. It's going to be the same thing. Like if you use the newest tech, you use the newest AI, you use Booking Agent IO, you use, if you're using the latest plugins, you're going to get that new sound, that new level marketing, that, things are going to be easier and faster. And so I always encourage people to like try and embrace that stuff. And embracing it could just be trying it once at least. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I hear you definitely. And yeah, like you were just talking about with marketing, even social media content creation, utilizing and getting all your content ready, that alone, marketing yourself as a music artist, it's a full-time job in itself.
Oh, yeah.
And when you can outsource, if you can outsource, that could be a tremendous help for you. You could avoid burnout. And that's why it's great when, in general, within the industry, even between peers, like when you're discussing and finding out about tools and ways that it could help you implement more positive into your career. And then even going back, this topic I want to touch on, I love this. So when you were talking about the beginning and the early stages of the companies and your career in the industry, you mentioned how you felt it was a positive, how, yeah, you were able to test it out with some people. You had like a great personal network. You knew some of these industry professionals and even some major labels. So to other independent artists and producers, how did you build your own contact list? What would you advise to others who want to build a contact list in the music industry?
Honestly, it's all a numbers game. People will tell you like you have to know the right people, you have to like put yourself in the right rooms, and that all could be true, but it's like it's a numbers game, and it's about how much outbound you do. No one is restricted by how many emails they can send, or you might be like literally restricted or something, but
I hear you, though,
can
yeah.
go and send emails to anyone. You could send DMs to everyone. You could send a LinkedIn message to everyone. My kind of big management break where I went from working with artists that were kind of like, middle ground and we're going to get signed to maybe like an indie label, to working with artists that were kind of at that major level.
Yeah, like your
literally
experience,
came from just came from sending DMs on Twitter. And I got a response from someone who was interested in grabbing lunch, and I took that lunch, and we kind of clicked, and from there it just kept working. And so you gotta, like, anytime you see something that could be a potential opportunity, just shoot that shot. There's the worst that could happen is you don't get a response, or they say no. But yeah, the music industry is like a lot of industries in that it's old school. And sometimes before people take a risk on you or really want to have like a talk about your career, they want to like have a coffee or have lunch, or have that human connection layer first. And so yeah, I send that DM, send that Twitter DM, send that email, send that LinkedIn message. Be human, like, find a way to go read what that person is working on and mention that and show genuine interest. And I feel like that kind of personal connection and more personalized outreach is getting more and more rare, especially now with AI. Like, everyone's just chat GPT emailing each other back and forth. And there's a way now where if you can break through that noise and you can kind of just like be a person that maybe wants to help out on that project, or see how you can get in the mix. That's you just got to go out and try.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and even when we talk about now cold outreach and just different forms of contact, now in 2026 for a music artist, do you think that cold outreach, whether it be cold calling, cold emailing, can that still be lucrative and work for an artist, or do you think that things have shifted?
100%. I think it can work. I think it can be lucrative. I think things have shifted into a little bit of a more kind of saturated area. So there might be like more noise going on, more people trying cold outreach, more people using AI to do copy. But I don't think that necessarily decreases the opportunity potential there. So much of what is done on the like music industry professional side, like, people might not realize, but what's going on at some of these labels and bigger companies is also just a bunch of cold outreach, looking for activations, looking to connect with brands, looking to connect with, opening artists in other management camps. And it's about kind of, just casting a wide net and then seeing what opportunities arise and then pursuing them in like a serious way. But yeah, I don't think there's any like secret cheat code or secret networking. And it's like any old school industry. Like, of course, there's a ton of nepotism. You've got the Granges who like run half the industry, and of course there's going to be that and those people. But for most artists, for most managers, you really just got to get out there and try and make things shake and make some noise, and send 20 emails a day.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier when you were building the 3 platforms in the early stages of it, how when you were involved with artist management, when you were working with your artists and how you're describing the budgets for some of these companies, whether it be the marketing and managing, you were discussing how maybe the budget could be utilized in a different way. In your experience with these companies and or labels, what was the budget looking like for these marketing projects, the marketing endeavors relating to an artist?
It can totally depend. It really depends on the terms you have, on what kind of record deal you have. But marketing budget for a project could be 20K just for the marketing budget. It could be 20K for the entire cost of the project: recording cost, marketing, licensing, touring. And so it totally depends on like where the artist is at, how big they are. I'd work with budgets as small as like 5K all the way up to like 40K. And you got to imagine, you're someone who's at like an entry or middle level salary at a record label, digital marketing department. You're doing 2 campaigns every week. A lot of times those people, they're not like, oh, this artist is like, this is their best project ever, I'm going to go extra hard on the marketing. They work in a big corporate office. They're trying to push the paper down to the next table. And so they're not necessarily like, how can I take this 5K and spend it as best as possible for this artist and like think about every dollar. A lot of times they're like, well, let's send 2K to this playlist marketer, and let's send 2K to this digital ad agency, and that's already 4, and then we've got 1 for some Instagram ads. Oh, I'm done with my job for the day. You know what I'm saying? And so, that stuff happens a lot at the majors. And, unless you have a manager that really advocates for you, or you're an artist who like really goes through everything about your project with a fine-tooth comb, you could end up just being, you could have had that money and it could have made a big difference, but it just kind of got pushed down the line. And so, that's an experience that a lot of indie managers will relate to, and a lot of people who maybe sign like a small deal will relate to. And it can go both ways. I know a fantastic major record label digital marketing teams. I also know people that are like trying to get home and pushing the paper down the line.
No, I hear you. When it comes to navigating your career as a music artist in general, would you say it's more important to allocate your marketing budget toward digital ads, meta ads, or also focusing on more old school methods such as radio with advice to an artist growing their career? What should they allocate? What's the best advice?
I don't have an exact number. It comes down to your personal means. If your career, making music's like a business, and so you want to think about it in the same way, and you want to think about, okay, what am I going to spend that's going to affect the bottom line versus what is something that maybe I could just grind out with some time and some energy and not have to put money towards. Unless you're getting some form of return, I suggest, especially for indie artists, like, don't go broke marketing your music. Leave space for it to not be something that you resent, something that kills your creative process. There's so much that you can do for, $20-$50. I think that's all of our products are under those prices. And aside from that initial investment of $20, $30, $50, all that you could sign up for Playlist Supply and you could put 100 hours in, you know what I'm saying, in that month if you really wanted to. And you're going to get some results. You could also, put an hour in each day, and then what your budget is mostly your time and not necessarily like a big spend. But if an artist has like a few hundred or a few thousand to spend, my recommendation, aside from, the tools that we've created, reaching out to playlists, if you're an artist that's at the right stage, kind of reaching out to shows, looking for opening spots with BookingAgentio or Radio Promo.io, reaching out to DJs and stations and trying to kind of get that first broadcasted play. It's so genre specific. Like for some genres, Facebook ads, Instagram ads, that stuff still can have a lot of potential. For other genres that are more saturated, think about when you scroll on your reels and you come across an ad for some rapper or for some music, and how often do you take that serious? You know what I'm saying? And then imagine yourself on the other end, like you're spending money for people who are scrolling to maybe watch your stuff for like 10 seconds or 15 seconds. So ads can work, super situational. I'm often telling artists, like, before dumping money into ads, especially with a smaller budget, ads are much better at scale. If you have a bigger budget, ads are more effective. If you have a smaller budget, rather spend that money on content and tools like Playlist Supply or Radio Promo.io that kind of open the door for you, but let you do the work. A lot of the other playlist submission platforms, they charge you per submission, and they have like systems by which you pay each time. And, we don't do that because we want an artist who's really motivated to be able to pay that $30 and then go hard and grind as much as they want. And if they really utilize the tool to its full extent, it doesn't matter that it was 20 or 30 bucks. They could have gotten 1,000 contacts out of it. And so, yeah, that's kind of my perspective on what to spend on and how money should be spent.
Yeah. No, awesome. So yeah, with Playlist Supply, Booking.io, and Radio Promo.io, let's dive into the platforms and let's talk about how the payments/credits work and how it would work in general for a new user getting involved and looking to sign up.
Yes. So all of the tools run on a credit system, and that credit system kind of opens you up to a secondary layer of features. But even if you're signing up for the most basic plan on any of the platforms, you're still going to be able to run unlimited searches. You're still going to be able to basically get unlimited contacts. Most of the features that require credits are additional features. Like for Playlist Supply, those credits allow you to run a health check on the playlist, which helps you avoid botted playlists, helps you check if the playlist is active. It also allows you to look at the follower history chart, and that kind of lets you know how the playlist has grown or not grown over time. And so, if you have a little more budget and those are questions that are important to you. Maybe it's not your first release. Maybe you've already done a few releases and you're really trying to focus in on quality playlists. We also have a feature with Playlist Supply, the organic search, and that allows you to search for, playlists that are showing up on similar artists discovered on. And those also cost credits, but those are basically like playlists that are guaranteed if you do the right similar artist search to kind of match your music and be driving traffic. And so BookingAgentio, it's very similar. The credits are for like an extra layer of contact searching and enrichment, which allow you to just kind of find more contacts, verify more contacts. And radio, it's basically the same thing. And so, for an artist that has a very minimal budget, you can sign up for the basic tier of any tool, and you can still, with a bunch of work and hours, get fantastic results. If you want to sign up for the middle tier, you're going to get access to those credits, which kind of allow you to be a little more thorough, check for the quality, verify the contacts a bit deeper. And yeah, it's just like I would say for like an artist doing their very first release, all the basic plans are probably fine. For someone that's a little more advanced, maybe already tried to do a marketing rollout or two on their own, wasn't necessarily getting the results they want, that's when it's time to step up to the middle plan or the higher tier plans. And with those higher tier plans, specifically the highest tier plan and the annual plans, our team does a lot of, strategy calls. And if you're someone who signs up with one of the higher tiers for Playlist Supply, BookingAgentio, Radio Promo IO, or you sign up for an annual subscription, you'll get me on a call, you'll get Ryan on a call, and we'll help you figure out what the best strategy is going to be. We're very bootstrapped. It's very small. We haven't done any fundraising. Ryan's an audio engineer and an artist. I was a manager and a drummer before I was a manager. My co-founder was a booking agent and also was a musician. And so all of us kind of come from the music industry side of things, not this tech side of things. And so we're here to like help artists.
Yeah, that's great, especially you're talking about the hands-on approach and all your experiences where you came from. Yeah, that's great, and that resonates so well. And let's talk about Playlist Supply feature, Playlist Vet. I'd love to dive into that more. And so explain Playlist Vet to us.
So Playlist Vet is basically our answer to the big question of, is it a good playlist? Kind of when playlisting got popular, people really jumped on it. And so a lot of curators saw that as an opportunity to make some money. And with Spotify playlisting, specifically third-party playlists, you will encounter people that are charging for playlist placements. I'll be the first to let you know that, that's against Spotify's terms, but all of the labels are doing it. And so, you do with that information what you will. There was a big problem where artists would get their music into, botted playlists with fake streams from, cities that had nothing to do with their genre or their music. And we started to see kind of a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, distros taking down artists who were botting their music. And some of these artists didn't even know it was happening. They were getting put in a playlist they thought was legit. And so Playlist Vet is our system of checking how many artists in that playlist have that playlist showing up on the front page of their profile. And Spotify has really increased its bot detection. They've really cracked down on the fake playlisting.
Yeah.
And so we've got a couple other kind of proprietary levers in that Playlist Vet that help us determine if it's a good playlist or not. But for playlists that are showing up on the discovered on or on the front page of an artist profile, Spotify does a really good job of like making sure that if those playlists are getting picked up by the algorithm, they're not botted and they don't have fake streams and they have real engagement and real new artist discovery. And so that it's just like our way of vetting a playlist and making sure it's actually a quality playlist. It has a low chance of your music getting botted. And yeah, that was something that was kind of an increasing problem. But in the last, 6 months or so, we've really seen Spotify crack down on all that in a big way. And so I'm seeing less and less fake botted playlists when doing those playlist vets nowadays than I was like a year ago or so.
Yeah, and I've heard that happen to some friends as well, where they were doing playlist marketing or using certain services that they may have not been too aware or sure about, but they moved forward, and unbeknownst to them, then something happened with their music where, of course, then there was numerous fraudulent streams or the sources weren't as organic as they thought, but then it disrupted their accounts and or their data, and then they had to try and adjust their account, or maybe then they weren't getting as positive discovery, all because of certain services they use that they weren't as knowledgeable about. And yeah, it's happened to numerous friends I know. That's why you have to be very careful with what you embark on and what you do. So that is another great conversation, and I know that's really popular now in the industry, and a lot of artists have had to navigate. But yeah, it is sometimes tricky waters to navigate. That's why it's great to discuss and talk about. So you mentioned how you got your start in management. So when you started in the industry, what inspired you to start with management? What led you down that path, the management path?
So, I've been a drummer my entire life. And I just was never good enough to like be making music myself. But I always loved music. I listen to music every day. Music is something that's inspired me. It's gotten me through hard times. I was very early on someone that really believed in the impact and the power of music as a force for change, as an industry. And yeah, like I had some friends that were really good at making music, kind of wanted to have a career in music, but they just sucked at music marketing and at branding themselves and at talking to people. And it honestly just started as like, I can help you make these Instagram posts, or sure, I can help you, write this email. And I realized, wait a second, that's like an actual skill set and an actual job that people pay money for and that people sign contracts for. And it's like, it kind of was it was a job that I kind of felt I was naturally good at. That also let me be in the room in the studio or, at the show.
Yeah, it's a vital part for sure.
Exactly. And so, yeah, what kind of inspired me was the opportunity to kind of do business in like an industry that was still kind of like an art form, but also like a business. And I was passionate about. Like, I listen to so much music. I think I'm trying to remember, but I think they do that Spotify Wrapped at the end of the year. They tell you like how many hours you've listened to, and I think I was at like 40-something thousand hours, and that my friend was like,
"That's amazing,
bro. You should probably listen to less music." He's like, "Bro, that's listening to like multiple hours every day." I'm like, "Okay."
It's all good. Yeah, you're locked in. So what?
Hell yeah.
That's awesome though. And even talking about back to the playlist vet and the services, we're talking about a lot of technology, data, analytics for an independent music artist. Music artists in general try and navigate and build their career. How important is it to have good and concise data and analytics, and how can they use that to improve their career?
It's super important. I was talking to another manager friend of mine recently, and he's convinced that at this point it's like 70% marketing and 30% music. Like, it's almost less now about how good your music is and more about the marketing. And when you consider, okay, marketing might be like the main way to get heard, you have to think about the data. You have to think about the analytics. You got to be looking on your Spotify for artists or your Instagram analytics.
Definitely.
And you got to see like, where are my fans at? And then you got to think about that when doing the marketing. Like, okay, all my fans are in this city. How am I activating that group of people? And if you ignore the analytics, you're just kind of throwing stuff out into the abyss. And specifically with the tools that we made, Playlist Supply, BookingAgentio, Radio Promo IO, this is all data that like a CAA or Universal or Red Light or all the big managers, all the big labels, all the big talent buyers and booking agents, and they've had access to this kind of data. It's really the indie artists and the managers and the people who are kind of building their way up and trying to get that first, 1,000, that first 100,000 listeners that don't have access to those kind of data. And, since we've rolled out our tools, we've had such positive reception, both from indie artists who have got amazing results and from the music industry establishment, people who work at big labels, and the label has access to that data, but our tool is just easier to use than sending 3 emails around the office and finding that one person with that one contact. And so it's it's using the data and using the analytics is how people are going to get the best results going into the future. If you don't use those data points and you don't use tools like the ones we've made to reach the right people, you're just going to be a step or two behind the others that are using that.
Yeah, so let's dive more into BookingAgent.io for independent artists. How can they use that tool to make their tour routing more efficient, to ensure a profitable regional tour?
Yep. So the big inspiration that helped motivate the development of that was an experience that both me and my co-founder had, and that was a lot of booking agents these days. They want to have a ton of like proof and evidence that you're already a successful performing artist before they sign you. That could be Instagram followers, TikTok followers. That could be previous tours that you've opened for a certain amount of people. But, 15, 20 years ago, booking agents were more willing to take a risk on a new artist who they believed in just because the music was fantastic. But that doesn't really happen anymore. And so I had this conundrum with a few artists where I was like, I know this is fire. I know this is going up. It's just about, getting the right agent. And even agents that were friends of mine were like, until they've done their first regional tour or until they've opened or until they've gotten this many followers, we don't want to touch it. And so a lot of times booking that first route, booking that first showcase, doing those first openers, that falls onto the artist or the manager. And that's like the stepping stone you need before you could get to an agent. A lot of artists also realize after doing it themselves that maybe they didn't need to cut an agent in 20%. And if it's just some like emails and organization, they could do it themselves or a manager can help them do it. Of course, there's a lot of perks to being represented by like a CAA or one of these much bigger agencies that have connections. But for an indie artist, if you buy Booking Agent IO, you can reach out to as many talent buyers, as many promoters, as many people as you're willing to put the time in for, and you can get that first breakthrough. You can get that first opening slot. You can book that first show. You can kind of get yourself, like I said before, like it's kind of a numbers game. You can get yourself into the mix to where then you can maybe then go and pitch CAA and you have demo footage from your first tour or from your first opening slots, and you can kind of get a feel for it. It's something that's like not meant for every artist. More artists are kind of at that stage where they're still building their first 100, 200,000 fans. And for them, I'm suggesting, go on Playlist Supply, go on Radio Promo IO, and work on digital marketing. But for artists that know they have evangelical fans who are ready to come to a show, it's time to book your first show and just do it yourself. You don't need to wait for an agent. You don't need to wait for someone to come and tell you, yeah, I really love you, I want to book you. That might never happen. You got to reach out to promoters, you got to reach out to talent buyers, and you got to book it yourself. Then you also don't have to cut someone in 20%. If you're getting paid, $500 for the show, 20% is a lot. And so, yeah,
for a music artist, do you think it's more important to hone in on your social media strategy and content, getting great at your social media, or honing in on live performance and focusing on that? What you think is better for an artist to focus on?
I think if you're just starting out and you're at the very beginning of your career, social media is much more important. But as soon as you feel like you have enough fans to where you could do a show, even if it's a small show, even if it's a show just for your fans, for 50 people in a backyard or some sort of community open mic or something like that, I would say once you have your first like 100 hardcore fans, then it's time to start thinking about how to scale with live. It's different. Live is a whole different world. Almost anybody these days can torrent Ableton and boot it up and produce some music and get some followers off of YouTube or Instagram. But it takes a different kind of professionalism to rock a show.
Yeah, and for a music artist, at what stage and point do you think they should then get with an agent? Hire an agent. At what stage or threshold do you think an artist has to pass where then they're ready for an artist manager, a booking agent?
I think, from my DIY kind of perspective, I want to say like never. I want to say like, be like Russ and be like some of these artists who like just built the business themselves and then hired people on the side and not cut them in on a percentage and find ways to kind of build it as like as your own business and DIY the whole way. But that's not, realistic for everybody. And so my kind of realistic answer to that question would be it's time to outsource when you're at a point where you doing all of the roles is like holding you back. If booking the shows, if doing the social media is keeping you out of the studio, is the thing that's like drawing you down, is ruining your life, is taking away from your creative juice, then it's time to outsource. But if it's just because it's boring and because you don't want to spend time doing it, that's like not a good enough reason.
Valid point. Very valid point. And getting back to the 3 tools, let's talk more about the interactive map search for all 3
Yes.
of the tools. So please explain that more to us.
Yeah, so the interactive map search, that's only on BookingAgentio and Radio Promo.io. And that is kind of like we kind of took the indie artist philosophy and used that in development when we thought of the map. We might implement something in the future that shows all of the contacts and all of the data as a list. But when it comes to marketing, when it comes to outreach to radio stations on Radio Promo.io, when it comes to booking shows, it's very much based on locality. You want to book shows where the analytics show you have fans. You want to reach out to radios where the analytics show you have fans. You want to be able to do contextual research. If you're searching up for artists similar to you, you want to see, okay, which part of the country or which part of the world are these artists getting played on Radio Promo.io? Where are they getting booked on BookingAgentio? And that can inform your decision. Like, you might know you might know Larry Jume's famous, but you might not know that, his fans aren't only in California, they're also in New York. And using tools like ours can show you, okay, actually I see now on the data in Radio Promo.io, this guy's getting picked up by all the stations on the map in that area. Or this guy's getting booked by the whole West Coast. I should focus on the West Coast. And so the map-based interface, that's just to really make it easy for artists to see, okay, these are the cities I want to target. This is the region I want to target. And yeah, kind of dial in on that.
Yeah, for sure. And with the programs now, with the automated tool and AI, with the 3 programs, how do you use AI to improve the platforms in general?
So we have AI working in the back end of all the products. They all use different parts of AI and different APIs in order to make sure that contact information is correct, to help organize it, to help provide relevant results. We're going to continue to do that as more AI technology comes out. Just like I'm someone who's like very, I think it's important to embrace new tech and embrace the future. You can count on us and our team on improving and releasing updates for Playlist Supply and BookingAgentio and Radio Promo.io as soon as the new tech becomes available. We're really on the forefront. Like, whatever is getting released in the AI world that's groundbreaking and new, we're testing it, we're trying it, we're seeing if we can make it make it a tool that's available to artists through our platforms. We recently had a cool breakthrough due to some new tech and some new data that's available that also allows us to pull YouTube playlist information with Playlist Supply. And that's something that hasn't been available up until like a few months ago. And so we're constantly looking for new ways to, okay, artists are doing Spotify playlists. That's been popular. What if we find a new way to get them contact information for influential YouTube playlists?
Yeah.
And find ways and things that artists aren't thinking about now and kind of steer them in that direction. Labels have been using YouTube playlists for a long time. And so that was one where it was like, okay, we know these work. Let's just make it something that indie artists are now thinking about.
Yeah. And with the YouTube feature that's a part of Playlist Supply, discuss with us more how an artist can utilize both parts of Playlist Supply's Spotify and YouTube feature. How can an artist go about both to ensure even more success with their campaigns?
So my biggest recommendation for getting the best results with those features is using the similar artist search and making sure before doing those, you do some serious market research on who you are, what your brand is, and then find 10 to 20 artists that are very similar to you, that are, maybe just a little bit bigger, maybe make the same style of music. Artists love to believe that they're unique and that they're the first one making this kind of music. And that might be true, but for most people, it's not. And there's someone else who did it before, and you got to find who are 10 people that did it before that were really successful, and where was their first show? Which station gave them their first radio play? Which was the first playlist on their profile in the Discovered On? And so all our tools are going to help you get that information. So you can say, okay, I've got 1,000 fans, but this artist that I just did research on, he's got 10,000 fans, but we make the same kind of music. I'm going to put his name into Playlist Supply. I'm going to put his name into BookingAgentio or Radio Promo IO. And then you can now see, okay, these are the playlists that help this person get from 1,000 to 10K. These are the shows that were the very first people to take a risk on this artist and let him perform. These are the radio stations that were, listening to that new artist right when he was getting his first station play. And so you can kind of see, okay, where are the people that are, willing to take a risk on a new artist, willing to support your same genre. And that market research is super important. Like, don't go around thinking like, yeah, I'm special. Find 10 or 20 artists that built a business around what you're doing and in a way that you aspire to, and then use them as examples when running searches on Playlist Supply, for both YouTube and for Spotify playlists. You can see with our tool all of the playlists on YouTube and Spotify that basically helped these artists grow, and then you can target those exact same playlists.
Yeah, and discussing a lot about business and data. As a music artist, do you think it's important for a music artist to think like an entrepreneur?
1,000%. It's a business like anything else. It's getting more and more commodified every day. If you just look at the transition from like CDs to the internet music and Spotify and streaming, things are only going to get more saturated. They're only going to get more commoditized. Music really is a business, and you got to treat it as such, and you got to be an entrepreneur and realize like, okay, the music is just the product, but after the product's made, there's still this whole life cycle you got to go through. You got to market it, you got to test it, you got to improve it. And so artists, I think, and that's true about a lot of creatives. I think the same way sometimes, but it's like, I think they make something cool once and then think it's that cool thing is gonna just change everyone's mind. But there's a lot of convincing that has to be done, and that's marketing and sales and business, and that's part of it.
Yeah, for sure. So for an independent artist just starting out, let's say they want to get their feet wet with these programs and platforms. Let's say an artist is limited on experience and funds. They're not exactly sure. They're just starting out. Do you recommend one out of three, or doing a hybrid approach and just doing all three at the same time? What would you recommend to a new artist just starting out and they want to get their feet wet with these tools?
Yeah, my first recommendation would be Playlist Supply. Spotify playlisting is probably the most accessible, the most easy to understand, and is going to get you kind of the most impactful first results, which is, getting your streaming numbers up, getting those first few fans. Playlist Supply and Radio Promo are both kind of the first ones I would start with. Radio Promo, you're going to want to have a little bit more. You're not going to want to be on, you could be on your first release, but when you're reaching out to radio stations and DJs, you're going to want to maybe have like a little EPK. You're going to want to maybe have a few existing releases. To reach out to a Spotify playlist, you just have to have one good song and a good story. And that's a lot of times where artists who are just starting out, that's where they're at. And so if you're at the very beginning, first few releases, I would suggest Playlist Supply. Pretty quickly after, if you're someone that's kind of done that market research, dissected your brand, and thought about it in that way, next I would do Radio Promo IO. And if you're someone that's kind of built your music and your brand to a professional point where you think you're ready for a show, then it's time for Booking Agent IO. And we're super accessible. You can DM us on Instagram on Playlist Supply or Booking Agent IO, and we're always happy to offer people demos if they want to try it out for free. If they want to send us a link to their music and have me listen to it and give some feedback on what I think would be the best tool or the best approach, our team is doing that too. And so, yeah, I would say you're a brand new artist, you're just starting out, start with Playlist Supply, then try Radio Promo IO. Once you build things up, then it's Booking Agent IO time.
That's great advice. And it's been great to learn more about these tools and platforms. What else would you like to share with us about these three tools and platforms?
I think it's all of these tools are a new way of democratizing data and putting data in the hands of indie artists, in the hands of managers, in the hands of people that might have not had access to it before. And this is all data that the industry's been running on for a long time. And so I highly suggest everyone go and try a couple of the tools out. If you're interested in a demo, want to set up a video call with someone from our team and learn a little bit more, just DM us on Instagram. We're super available. We're super accessible. We have a new tool that we're planning on releasing in the next couple months called syncplacement.com. And that's going to be a very similar tool to the other ones we've built, but it's going to focus on music director contacts and artists who are looking to get sync placements. And so that's something very exciting. Hell yeah. If you're interested, and to the listeners who might be interested, follow along on social media, follow one or all of our accounts. And once it's out, you'll be able to see that too. But yeah, we're kind of, I think the only thing I want to wrap it up with is, we're in a technology era, and we're at a point where, a lot of things that were gatekept before, a lot of things that were inaccessible before are getting more and more available and accessible because of technology. And so embrace that technology, give Playlist Supply a try, give BookingAgentio a try, test out Radio Promo.io. And, if you're someone who's passionate and believes your music has an opportunity to make a big difference, you owe it to yourself to try get it out there and do some outreach.
Yeah, for independent artists, how important do you think it is for them to focus on sync?
It's tough. It totally depends on genre. If you're making death metal, it's going to be different to sync than some pop music. And so I think with sync, it comes down to more case by case. It's one of the few ways that as a music artist, as an indie artist, if you get a good placement, you can start to make money. And that's really important to making your business and your career and your music sustainable. Radio as well. If you get a radio placement, there's a avenue to get paid from that. And so that's Spotify doesn't pay very much. Booking shows, radio, sync, and merchandise. Those are the only ways that artists make money these days. And so I would say, it's important if it fits your genre and you're at that level where you need to make things profitable. You know what I mean? But ahead of that, I think it's for artists who are just starting out, I wouldn't stress about it too hard. Yeah. I would wait till you kind of have a few releases, kind of know your brand a little better, and yeah.
Yeah. Last but not least, where do you think the music industry is headed over the next 1 to 3 years?
That's a good question. It's a toss-up just with how fast things move and how fast tech is. I think things are really getting more and more commodified. We're seeing more and more distros that are getting, I think DistroKid is now for sale. I think TuneCore is now for sale. And I'm not too sure where things will be in 2 or 3 years, but I think it's going to travel more down this path of, technology making things more accessible and things becoming more decentralized. I think we're going to see more artists like Chappelle Roan and indies who come out of nowhere and in a short time are filling massive arenas and stuff because, of things like TikTok or Instagram being able to amplify your virality and artists having access to tools like Radio Promo or Playlist Supply and being able to do their own marketing. There's no longer like the gatekeepers of the industry staggering everyone and slowing things down with yellow tape. And I think we're going to see more kind of quick viral artists blowing up and then disappearing. More catalog sales. It's an interesting time. I'm excited to participate in it, and you can also count on me and my team releasing some new tools and some new tech.
Yeah, it definitely is an interesting time, and it's definitely going to be fascinating to see where it all goes. But Benji, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you so much for coming on the broadcast. It was a pleasure talking with you. Everybody, be sure to check out and learn more about 3 services that Benji was talking about. It was great to learn more about Playlist Supply, BookingAgentio, and Radio Promo.io. Be sure to check them out on social media. They all have their social media handles and profiles public. Be sure to check it out, learn more, dive into it. And like I said, Benji, just thank you so much. It was great to learn more about these programs. And thank you for coming on and for your time. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I'm very grateful for your time and for the fantastic questions and the opportunity. And I'm excited for the future. Maybe we'll double back and do this again sometime once the sync placement tool is out and the future is upon us.
Definitely. Yeah, that would be cool. Any last thing you want to leave to the listeners before we sign off?
Feel free to hit us up on any of the platforms. We're super accessible. Shoot us an email, a text, and give it a shot. Check out the tech we've built, Playlist Supply on Instagram, BookingAgentio on Instagram, Radio Promo IO on Instagram, and all social media. You shoot us a DM on any platform, and someone from my team will get back to you, or I will be on there responding. And so, yeah, tap in for the journey, and we're planning on making more tools for artists and making as big an impact as possible.
Great information to know. Well, everybody, thank you again for tuning in to another episode of Miltrick Media. I am your host, Miltrick. Thank you again to Benji Stein. Appreciate it. And thank you all for tuning in, and we will see you next time.